The city never really sleeps, even in the quiet corners of Los Angeles, where the streets hum with a low, restless energy. The night can turn dangerous in the blink of an eye. Officer Peter Harris knew that better than anyone. 8 years on the force had taught him that peace was fragile, that one wrong call could change the course of a life, sometimes more than one. But he never imagined that doing his job one ordinary night would drag him through months of stress, suspicion, and public humiliation, all because of one man's false words. It was a Friday night when it happened, the kind of shift that promised to be long but uneventful. The radio crackled with the usual noise complaints, minor accidents, a domestic disturbance or two. Then came the call from a downtown bar. Possible assault. 2 suspects fled the scene. Officer Harris responded without hesitation. By the time he arrived, the chaos was already cooling down. A man was bleeding from the side of his head, another was shouting at the bartender, and the air reeked of spilled beer and adrenaline. It was a familiar scene, one he had stepped into too many times before. Harris scanned the room, steady and calm. He saw a man sitting at the bar, his posture too relaxed for someone surrounded by tension. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, the kind of guy who'd been drinking for a while but still believed he had control. His name, Harris would soon learn, was Nick Ice. The witnesses pointed toward him. Someone said he'd thrown the first punch. Someone else said he'd assaulted the bar owner. It was messy, uncertain. But one thing was clear. There had been violence, and the officer had a duty to act. When Harris approached and placed a hand on Nick's shoulder, the man didn't cooperate. "You're under arrest," Harris said firmly. Nick twisted away, shouting that he hadn't done anything. Harris tried again, ordering him to put his hands behind his back. Instead, Nick jerked around, half standing, half swinging. The situation turned physical in an instant. Harris reacted by the book. He twisted the man's arm, took him to the ground, and secured the handcuffs. No baton, no knee strikes, no unnecessary force. Just control and restraint. For Harris, it was a routine arrest. For Nick Ice, it would become the fuel for revenge. Days later, Harris learned that Nick had filed a complaint against him, accusing him of police brutality. The claim was outrageous, that Harris had struck him in the knee with a baton after he was already handcuffed. Worse, Nick didn't just complain to the department, he wrote a detailed, 2-page letter to a Los Angeles city councilman, calling Harris a dangerous officer with a violent streak. The letter spread quickly, landing on the desks of Harris's supervisors and internal affairs investigators. For Harris, it was like a nightmare set in slow motion. He had done nothing wrong, yet suddenly he was being treated like a suspect himself. He was interviewed, scrutinized, questioned about his conduct, and shadowed by doubt wherever he went. Colleagues whispered. Superiors grew distant. Even his wife noticed the change. How quiet he became, how short-tempered, how the laughter had drained from their home. The investigation dragged on for months. Every shift felt heavier. Every call in the field carried an extra weight, because Harris was no longer just thinking about doing his job. He was thinking about being watched, judged, second-guessed. And when the moment came that required him to act decisively, he hesitated. The memory of that false accusation crept into his mind like poison, dulling his instincts. He feared that any move, even justified, might be twisted against him again. Eventually, the investigation cleared him completely. The witnesses' stories collapsed under scrutiny, and the evidence didn't match Nick's claims. The man's credibility was shattered when his blood alcohol level and prior record were revealed. Still, the damage had been done. The stress had eaten away at Harris's confidence, his reputation, and his peace of mind. When the department finally told him he could return to normal duty, he realized nothing felt normal anymore. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sleepless nights, they lingered. So he made a decision that few officers dared to make. He filed a civil lawsuit against Nick Ice for making a false allegation. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every honest cop who'd ever been falsely accused while risking their life to protect others. The courtroom was quiet that morning. Judge Judy, sharp and fearless as ever, listened intently as both men told their sides of the story. Harris was composed, respectful, his words clear and deliberate. He explained how the complaint had spiraled into a full-blown internal affairs investigation, how it had strained his family, and how it had eroded his confidence in the field. He didn't sound angry. He sounded exhausted, like a man who'd been forced to defend the truth for too long. Then came Nick's turn. He painted himself as the victim, claiming he'd been sitting quietly, enjoying a beer, when Harris swooped in and arrested him for no reason. He denied resisting, denied the fight, denied everything. But his story wavered under pressure. When the judge asked how many times he'd been arrested before, he hesitated. "A couple 502s, he muttered. "DUI charges." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. She saw right through him. Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. A witness had told police that Nick had assaulted someone during the bar fight. That alone gave Harris probable cause to make the arrest. Whether or not the statement was later retracted didn't matter. Harris had acted lawfully based on the information at the scene. The only remaining question was whether he had used excessive force. And when the judge reviewed the evidence, there was no sign of brutality. No baton strikes. No injury consistent with Nick's story. Just a clean, controlled takedown. Judge Judy leaned back, her voice calm but firm. "Your allegation was clearly false, sir," she told Nick. "You may not like being arrested, but that doesn't give you the right to lie about a police officer doing his job. Officer Harris had a duty to act. You resisted. He did what he was trained to do, and you made his life miserable with your lies." The courtroom fell silent. Nick stared at the floor, his bravado gone. Then the judge turned to Harris. "Officer Harris, you deserve to be compensated," she said. "You've been through months of unnecessary stress because of this man's false complaint." Harris nodded respectfully. "Ma'am, I put down $5,000 as the amount," he said, "because that's the court's jurisdiction. I'll respect whatever the court decides." Judge Judy thought for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Here's what I'm going to do. $5,000, half to you and half to the Los Angeles Police Benevolent Fund. That seems fair." Harris's shoulders finally relaxed. Justice at last. When the gavel came down, it wasn't just about the money. It was about restoring something far more valuable, his integrity. The false complaint that had haunted him for months was finally laid to rest, crushed under the weight of the truth. Outside the courtroom, the cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and Harris simply walked past them, steady as ever. He wasn't looking for fame or revenge. He just wanted his life back. He wanted to go home, to his wife, to a quiet night's sleep without the shadow of doubt over his name. And somewhere in that sprawling city, as the lights of Los Angeles flickered against the horizon, Officer Peter Harris drove his patrol car once more into the night, calm, focused, and unbroken. Because sometimes, justice doesn't arrive in the heat of a siren's wail. Sometimes it comes slowly, quietly, in the steady voice of truth that refuses to be silenced.